pen was already in his hand when she said it. 11 men sat around a table built from a single slab of black walnut, and every one of them wanted Tae Yang No to sign. The lawyers wanted it. The partners from the Cho family wanted it, smiling the careful smiles of men who had spent 18 months building a trap and were watching the door finally swing shut. The merger was a masterpiece, 2 empires braided into one, 100 pages of clean, beautiful language, and at the bottom of the last page a line waiting for the signature of the most dangerous man in Chicago. He uncapped the pen. The room exhaled. "Don't sign that." The voice came from the corner, from the woman no one in the room had looked at twice. She had been brought in as a formality, an outside auditor, a compliance box to tick, a quiet professional in a grey suit who had spent 2 days in a windowless room with the financials, while the real decisions were made by men who never learnt her name. She was not supposed to speak. Auditors confirm they do not interrupt the signing of a $100 million merger between 2 crime families. Naya Okonkwo stood up anyway, a single folder in her steady hands. "That contract will destroy you," she said. Section 9. The cross-default clause, tied to a subsidiary you've never heard of. The moment you sign, you've personally guaranteed $400 million in Cho debt that's structured to come due in 90 days. They're not merging with you. They're using your signature to make their collapse your collapse. She set the folder down on the black walnut, open to a page she had flagged in red. "You won't own half of an empire by Friday. You'll own all of a grave." The room did not breathe. The Cho lawyers came alive at once, voices overlapping, irregular, insulting, who let the help speak, and one of Tae Yang's own men took a step toward her. Because in this world, a person who disrupts a signing is either a fool or a plant, and both got handled the same way. Tae Yang No raised one finger off the table. Everything stopped. He did not look at the lawyers. He did not look at his men. He looked at the auditor, at the steadiness of her, at the absolute absence of fear in a woman who had just called 11 dangerous men either liars or marks to their faces, and then he looked down at the page she had flagged in red. He read it. Slowly, once, and then Tae Yang No, who had not been surprised by anything in 9 years, went very, very still, the capped pen lowered to the table. The serpent tattoo coiling up the side of his throat caught the light from the window, and in a voice so quiet the whole room had to lean toward it to hear, he said, "Everyone out. Not her." To understand why those words emptied a room of armed men in under a minute, you have to understand what Tae Yang No's stillness meant to the people who served him. The 44th floor of the Hanseo Tower was not an office. It was a fortress disguised as a boardroom, glass on 3 sides, and the grey sweep of the Chicago Lake on the 4th, where 2 generations of a family that controlled the river had decided who in the city would rise and who would quietly disappear. The November rain ran down the tall windows in long silver threads, blurring the lower city into a smear of gold and shadow. Inside, the air smelled of expensive coffee and colder things underneath it, the particular scent of a room where the stakes are never written down. Tae Yang had inherited the empire at 26, when his father's heart gave out at a dinner that may or may not have been arranged, and he had spent the 9 years since making certain no one ever caught him unprepared again. He was not loud. The loud ones died young. He was still, a stillness so complete that men confessed things to it just to make it stop, a stillness that read a room the way other men read a newspaper. He had built his power on a simple and terrible discipline. He was never surprised. He had seen every angle before it was played. He had counted every exit before he entered. And the people around him had learned that the only thing more dangerous than Tae Yang No angry was Tae-Yang-no surprised. Because surprise meant someone had gotten past the one defense he trusted, and someone getting past that defense was about to find out why. The auditor had gotten past it in a single sentence. Naya Okonkwo had not planned to. She had planned to do what she always did: find the truth in the numbers, document it, and survive. Because Naya knew things about surviving that the men in that room would never have to learn. She had been the youngest forensic accountant ever promoted at her firm, a woman who could read a balance sheet the way other people read faces, who found the lie that 3 senior partners had missed in a fraud case that made the firm its reputation. And when she found the next lie, the one inside the firm, the one that implicated a client too important to lose, they did to her what powerful institutions always do to the person who sees too clearly. They made it her fault. A quiet dismissal, a whisper in the industry that Naya Okonkwo was difficult, unstable, not a team player, no lawsuit, because she could not afford the lawyers and they could afford all of them. 3 years of contract work after that, the freelance scraps, the windowless rooms, the jobs where no one bothered to learn her name because they assumed there was no name worth learning. She had taken this job because it paid in 2 days what most paid in 2 weeks, and she had not asked what kind of men hired auditors who didn't ask questions. She had found out by lunch on the first day. And she had spent the rest of those 2 days fighting the same war she always fought, the one between the part of her that had learned to keep her head down and survive, and the part of her that had never, not once, been able to watch someone walk into a trap and say nothing. The second part had stood up in that boardroom. It always did. It was the only part of her the world had never managed to break. Welcome back, my fierce hearts and midnight souls. Before we step further into the dark, take just one moment, subscribe if you haven't yet, tap that like, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from tonight. I love seeing this family of ours stretch across cities and countries and time zones, every one of you choosing the quiet of this room with me. Every comment, every bit of love you leave keeps these dangerous stories breathing. So dim the lights. Find your quiet place. And let's begin. When the room emptied, it emptied fast. The Cho lawyers went pale and gathered their papers with the unhurried panic of people who have just realized the mark seized the con. Tae-Yang's men filed out on a look, leaving only one, a lieutenant named Hyun, who stationed himself by the door with his hands folded and his eyes on the auditor, because a woman who could detonate a merger with one sentence was a woman who needed watching. Then it was just the two of them and the black walnut table and the rain. "Sit," Tae-Yang said. "I'll stand," said Naya. "I've found that sitting down is how they get you comfortable enough to stop noticing the exits." The corner of his mouth moved. It was not quite a smile, and it clearly surprised him to feel it. "You think you need the exits? From me." "I called 11 armed men either crooks or fools 30 seconds ago," she said. "I'd be an idiot not to know where the door is." He studied her. The stillness, which most people experienced as a pressure that made them talk, did not seem to touch her at all. She let the silence sit. She had outlasted worse silences in worse rooms. "Section 9, he said finally. "Walk me through it. All of it." So she did. She did not soften it for him, and she did not perform it. She opened the folder and walked him through the architecture of his own destruction line by line, the shell subsidiary buried in an appendix, the cross-default trigger, the 90-day balloon, the way the whole 100-page masterpiece was a single elegant mechanism for transferring the Cho family's coming collapse onto the signature of a man too proud to read the appendices himself. She had found it because she read everything. She had always read everything. It was the habit that had ended her career, and it was, she understood, about to either save her life or end it, and she could not for the life of her have stopped herself doing it either way. When she finished, Tae Yang No sat for a long moment looking at the red-flagged page. 18 months, he said quietly. They spent 18 months building this. 4 law firms. My own people reviewed it. He looked up at her. And a contractor I hired for 2 days found it in an afternoon. Your people reviewed what they were shown, Naya said. I read what they buried. There's a difference, and powerful men pay for the first kind and get destroyed by the second. The serpent on his throat caught the light, and Tae Yang No looked at the woman the entire room had treated as furniture and made a decision that would reshape the city. You're not leaving in 2 days, he said. That wasn't the contract. The contract changed, he said, the moment you opened that folder. He told himself it was practical, and for once, it almost was. The Cho family had just been exposed mid-trap, which meant they were now the most dangerous they had ever been, because a trap that fails becomes a war. And the only person who fully understood the mechanism of that trap, who could read the next contract and the one after, who could see the lie inside the lie, was a forensic accountant the rest of the world had thrown away. Keeping her close was the most rational thing he had done in years. That was the story he gave Hyun. Hyun, who had served him for 11 years and had never once seen him empty a room for a single voice, did not believe it for a moment. So Naya Okonkwo, who had spent 3 years in windowless rooms being paid to not ask questions, was given an office with a view of the whole Grey Lake and a salary that made her hands shake when she read it, and access to 9 years of an empire's books, and slowly, ledger by ledger, the woman the industry had erased began to come back to life. It came back in layers, the way it always does. It came back the first week, when she found a second skim, not the Cho trap, but an internal one. A trusted captain quietly bleeding the shipping accounts for 6 years, hidden so well that 9 years of audits had missed it. She did not announce it. She documented it, cold and complete, and set it on Tae Yang's desk without a word, the way she set down everything. He looked at the file, and then at her, and said nothing, and the captain was gone by the weekend. It came back the afternoon a rival's emissary sat across the black walnut table, lying with every figure he quoted, and Naya, taking notes. Invisible, the way she had trained herself to be invisible, slid a single sheet of paper in front of Tae Yang, with 3 numbers circled and the word fabricated beside each. She had spent a career reading the gap between what the numbers said and what they meant. She read this man like a falsified return. And it came back in the long blue hours when neither of them slept. Him, because the chair at the head of the table had taught him that sleep was a thing you could not afford. Her, because some part of her was always still waiting for the knock that meant they had finally decided to take everything again. He began to tell her things in fragments. The father at the dinner. The 9 years of never being surprised. The particular loneliness of a man whose entire power rested on the fact that no one could ever get past his guard, which meant no one ever got in. You built a fortress where nobody could surprise you, she told him one of those nights, across the dark and the city lights. So nobody could ever hurt you again. I understand the design. I built the same thing out of spreadsheets. If you read everything, nobody can lie to you. If nobody can lie to you, nobody can leave you holding the bag. She paused. It works. It also means you spend your whole life alone in the room, double-checking the appendices. He looked at her for a long time. And then someone reads them faster than you. And then, she agreed, you have to decide what to do about that. What the Cho family decided to do was the oldest move in the book. For months, they had been recalculating. The merger was dead, the trap exposed, and they understood, because everyone in that world eventually understands, that the thing standing between them and Tae-Yang No was no longer his guards or his lawyers. It was a forensic accountant who could not be fooled and could not be bought, who had walked into their 18-month masterpiece and read it like a children's book. So they did what people in that world do when they cannot get past a person's defences. They went around them. They took her. They took her on the one evening she insisted on going alone, to a storage facility across the city where she kept 3 years of her own documentation, the boxes of evidence from the firm that destroyed her, because some stubborn part of her had never stopped building the case she could not afford to file. They thought they were taking leverage, a soft thing, a number cruncher in a grey suit. They had not read her closely enough. Because Naya Okonkwo had spent 3 years being thrown away by powerful people, and she had learnt the same lesson every survivor in this story learns: the only person guaranteed to save you is the one already in the room. She did not panic when the men closed in. She read them the way she read everything: the nervous one, the one in charge, the cheap lock on the van's rear door that someone had decided was good enough for a hostage who balanced books for a living. She had a phone they hadn't found, because she kept it where men never thought to look. And she did not call for rescue. She called the one number she had memorized, and she spoke for exactly 9 seconds in the calm, flat voice of a woman reading off an address, because she had clocked the route. Because she clocked everything. Because that was the thing the world had tried and failed to take from her. She gave Tae-Yang No the location of her own kidnapping before her kidnappers had finished congratulating themselves. He came with everything he had. Because somewhere in the blue hours, the man who was never surprised had been surprised by exactly one thing: how much it would cost him to lose her, and he had no intention of paying it. But when he arrived at the address she had recited, he found the situation already half solved. One man, down at the van, the cheap lock defeated, and Naya standing in the cold with a tire iron in her steady hand and 3 years of her own evidence boxes loaded into the back of a car she'd commandeered, because if she was going to be kidnapped from a storage unit, she was not going to leave the case behind. Tae-Yang No stopped at the edge of the lot, his men spreading out behind him, the rain coming down. "I came for you," he said. Naya lowered the tire iron. There was a cut above her eyebrow and absolute steel in her face. "I noticed," she said. "You were close, not first. A breath. I called you because I trusted you'd come. That's new for me. Don't make me regret the data." For the first time in 9 years, Tae-Yang No laughed, a short, astonished, almost helpless sound, and crossed the lot to her through the rain. "You loaded the boxes," he said. "I read everything," she said. "I keep everything. You knew that when you didn't let me leave in 2 days. It would have been easy to stay after that. Staying is the warm room after the cold one, the path the body takes on its own." So Tae-Yang No gave her the door. He had it built within the week, with the patience of a man who finally understood her. Not money, not a job, but the one thing she had been unable to buy for herself in 3 years. He put the full weight of his organization behind the case in her boxes, the lawyers she could never afford, the pressure on the right regulators, the evidence finally placed where it could not be buried by people who owned the people who buried things. He set the filing on the black walnut table between them, complete, ready, her name spelled right at the top, her career restored the moment it was submitted. "This clears you," he said. "Properly, the firm's exposure is documented, the regulators have agreed to reopen it, and there are 4 firms that would hire you back at twice your old title by the end of the month. He did not look at her while he said it. You walked into a room full of dangerous men and told the most dangerous one he was about to die. Nobody asked you to. You don't owe me your life for that. The door's open. The lock was always on your side. It always was. Naya looked at the filing, the thing she had carried in boxes for 3 years, handed back to her, finished, free. She did not say, "I want to stay." That had never been who she was, and her heart did not bend that direction. She picked up the filing. She read it, all of it, because of course she read all of it, and then she set it down and slid it back across the black walnut toward him. 3 years I carried these boxes, she said. You know why? Not because I wanted my old desk back. Because I couldn't stand the idea of them being right about me. That I was difficult, that I saw things that weren't there. She stepped closer. But you didn't fix this to put me back in someone else's office. You fixed it and handed it back and told me to go. Nobody's ever done that. No one with power has ever looked at what I can do and wanted me to have more room for it, not less. Her voice did not waver. I'm not staying because I have nowhere to go. I have everywhere to go now. I'm staying because I'm the only one in your whole empire who'll read the appendix and tell you the truth. And you're the only one who's ever looked at the truth I found and said thank you instead of "you're fired." She held his eyes. I'm not going to be the soft thing they take to get to you, Tae-yang. I'm going to be the reason no contract they put in front of you is ever safe to sign again. For a long moment, the man who was never surprised did not move. Then he reached out and took her hand, the steady one, always the steady one, and for the first time in 9 years, he let the whole room watch him do it. A year later, a delegation came to the 44th floor of the Hanseo Tower with a contract 100 pages long and 100 careful smiles, and the men around the black walnut table wanted Tae-yang No to sign. But this time, before the pen left its place, the woman at his right hand, in a charcoal suit that cost more than she used to make in a season, slid the contract toward herself, turned without hurry to a page somewhere in the buried appendices, and circled a single clause in red. She set it back down in the center of the table. Section 11, she said quietly. We're done here. The delegation went pale. The room went silent in the particular way rooms go silent when something has happened that no one has a category for. And Tae-yang No, who did not smile, set down his pen and looked at the woman the entire room had once treated as furniture, and there was something in his stillness now that had not been there before. Not the stillness of a man bracing for a surprise, the stillness of a man who finally has nothing left to guard against. Because the best reader in the world is sitting on his side of the table. He had built a fortress so no one could ever get past his guard. In the end, the thing that saved him was the one person who got all the way through it and decided to stay and read the fine print at his side. Some doors, once opened, were never the kind that close. That's where I'll leave them tonight, my fierce hearts and midnight souls, not rescued, not saved, but read all the way down to the part they hoped no one would check, which is the only thing any of us has ever really wanted, someone who looks that closely and stays anyway. If this story found a soft place in you, leave it a like and subscribe so the next one finds you in the dark. And do one small thing for me before you go. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story has travelled tonight. Every city, every country, every quiet room with the lights turned low. Next time, a translator is hired for one dinner between two families who hate each other, and halfway through the meal she realizes both sides are lying to each other in languages they think she doesn't speak. What she decides to do with that is the whole story. You won't want to miss it. Until then, stay dangerous, stay seen. I'll be here in the dark, waiting for you.